Welcome to the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas, with another segment of Making Sense with Gabriel, with our guest, Gabriel Gaarden. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hi, Gabriel. How are you?
Doing well. How about you, Nancy?
I'm doing good. Glad to be here again on another segment of Making Sense with Gabriel.
Me too.
Now, the question for this time is, can you obtain adequate calcium from plant foods or fortified foods?
Great question, Nancy. And the answer is a resounding yes. So there's a little bit of fear mongering out there that if you don't eat dairy from cows, which is rich in calcium, that you may need to be concerned about calcium, but it's not the case. We definitely want to concentrate though on calcium is an important nutrient though. And so most specifically, so that people don't have to worry too much, it's just another great reason to eat a wide variety of whole plant foods, right? So fruits and veg and different kinds of beans or legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, whole intact grains, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. And so if we eat a wide variety of essentially like these 9 different groups of foods, we're going to do a wonderful job at basically meeting all of those important nutrient needs, including calcium. Excuse me. I got a little something fuzzy in my throat. So that's number 1. And then number 2, of course, is we can also focus on foods that are rich in calcium. So dark leafy greens are a big one. I think beans are another one. Certain types of nuts and seeds. I can just do a quick Google search here. Plant foods rich in calcium. And anybody can do this, right? And you'll get some things that turn up. But yeah, some of the top hits are going to be those dark leafy greens. And most specifically, when we're talking about dark leafy greens, there are certain dark leafy greens that happen to be really high in a certain nutrient called oxalates. And oxalates will tend to bind calcium in our gut, and they'll pull it all the way through and we'll eliminate it. And so it prevents us from absorbing the calcium, or at least a lot of the calcium. We certainly will still absorb some. And so spinach happens to be really high in calcium, but it's also really high in oxalates. And so even though spinach is a really healthy food and people should eat plenty of spinach, you know, especially if they like it, but they shouldn't think of it as being a great source of calcium, although it has a lot of calcium. Because of all those oxalates, they're going to bind a lot of the calcium and they're going to prevent us from absorbing it. But there are other dark leafy greens, also very rich in calcium, like kale, like collard greens, just 2 examples. But there's also mustard greens, turnip greens, watercress, right? So think about all these other different types of greens. We know that dark leafy greens are some of the healthiest foods on the planet. So as often as we can incorporate them into our routine, the better. And I'll give people a few tips about how to do that when I finish this explanation. So we want to incorporate those foods regularly, and especially those foods, other types of greens like the kale and the mustard greens and the collard greens. They're really high in calcium, but they have lower amounts of oxalates. So that's awesome because those oxalates aren't going to get in the way. We're going to absorb a lot of that calcium. And that calcium is actually even more bioavailable or more easily absorbed than the calcium in dairy or the calcium in cow's milk. And so that's great news because with dairy, we get the baggage, right? You get the bonus of, this is a term that I learned from Dr. Michael Greger at nutritionfacts.org. You get the bonus with or without the baggage. So you get the bonus of calcium with the baggage of the saturated fat and the animal protein and other ingredients that we really don't want to consume when we're eating dairy or drinking milk.
And isn't it true, excuse me for 1 second, but isn't it true also that the calcium from dairy is not actually absorbed as much as that of the leafy greens that you just talked about, because they have the same thing?
Yeah. So yeah, I mentioned that the dark leafy greens that are lower in oxalates are going to have a higher bioavailability. And so that means that the body can more easily or more readily absorb the calcium in those dark leafy greens like kale, mustard greens, turnip greens, and collard greens. And also we get the bonus without the baggage, right? Because we don't have all the baggage of the saturated fat and the other ingredients that are not, and the cholesterol and everything else that's not healthy for us in the dairy. We don't have any of that baggage. We only get the bonus with dark leafy greens, because with dark leafy greens, we get all the phytochemicals, the vitamins, the minerals, the fiber, all these different things that dairy does not contain. Yes, dairy has some vitamins and minerals, but not nearly the kind of diversity of vitamins and minerals that we're going to find in dark leafy greens. So you get no baggage when you're eating dark leafy greens. We just want to make sure not to consume. If people love high oxalate dark leafy greens, and I'm going to name two of them. Spinach, I already named. Another one is Swiss chard, right? Swiss chard, rainbow chard. Another beautiful dark leafy green, we should eat it, but we don't want to be eating large amounts of spinach or Swiss chard or any kind of chard on like a daily basis, and consider that like our primary source of calcium, because again, those are high in oxalates, and oxalates bind calcium and prevent our gut from being able to absorb it. So some great tips on eating more dark leafy greens, because we know they're such a great source of calcium, is to make homemade pesto. Right? You can certainly buy a pesto, but many pestos store-bought are going to contain cheese, because different types of hard aged cheeses like Parmesan are common ingredients in store-bought or conventional pesto. I'm sure you can find vegan pestos too, but ideally we're making it homemade more often because it's going to be healthier that way. Use a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. Use different kinds of nuts and seeds, because again, nuts and seeds are certain nuts and seeds are going to have some calcium in them as well. But then also they help us to absorb some of the other wonderful vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals that we find in sources like dark leafy greens that are just full of all these beautiful nutrients for our bodies. So that fat in the nuts and seeds can help us absorb certain vitamins and minerals that are super important for our bodies. So, and then they're going to add flavor and texture, right? So, and think diverse here, right? The pine nut is the classic nut that's used in pesto. But let's think more creatively here. We can use almonds, we can use cashews, walnuts, you can use different types of seeds like sunflower and pumpkin. And so I'll throw 1 or 2 or 3 different kinds of nuts and seeds anytime I make a homemade pesto. And then I'll throw 1 or 2 or 3 different types of dark leafy greens in there. And then I'm getting this wonderful, diverse bounty of nutrients, right? So I'll throw kale in there. I'll throw different types of herbs like parsley or cilantro in there. And those are other types of dark leafy greens as well, those different herbs. Wonderful nutrient profiles. And so we can get a lot of, and it's an easy way to get greens in, because who doesn't love pesto? You know, you can put it on bread, you can eat it with tortillas, you can eat it with just beans and rice. It's delicious that way. Of course, you can put it on a whole grain pasta. You know, it's a classic ingredient for pasta. And so pesto, I'm telling you, you can make it in a blender or a food processor. And it's a great way to get those dark leafy greens. And then it's going to be a great way to make sure we're meeting those calcium needs. Another thing, like you mentioned, fortified plant milks and or calcium set tofu. Other beautiful ways to get calcium. And then I personally drink just a very simple West Soy, or Trader Joe's makes an organic soy milk that's just water and organic soybeans, because I don't like a lot of the other additives that they throw into. They shouldn't be a huge problem for folks that want to get some extra vitamins and minerals like calcium in with the different types of fortified plant-based milks, but they tend to throw in added sodium. Sometimes they tend to throw in added sugar and other stuff that I don't personally want to drink. So another cool tip that you can use is if you're making a homemade plant milk or soy milk, where you're not going to get all those additives in, you can get this red algae supplement. I think Now Foods is a company that makes it super affordable, because you only need to add a little bit. And there's a nutritionist named Simon Hill. He runs this great website called Plant Proof, this great podcast. And he recommends putting in about 300 milligrams of calcium per cup, more or less, like 250 to 300 milligrams of calcium. You can just shake a little bit of that red algae powder into your, like in my case, my organic soy milk that doesn't have any calcium in it. You don't taste it, but that's going to be another great way that you can make sure that you're getting plenty of calcium every day, because again, calcium is an important nutrient. We want to make sure we're getting enough of it to help support the strength of our skeleton, right? The strength of our bones. So I hope that gives people some great tips.
That, I think, was marvelous. I enjoyed everything you said. And the fact that people can get calcium without the baggage, as you said, from dark leafy greens.
Yes, dark leafy greens, calcium set tofu, and fortified plant milks, or just add a little bit of that red algae supplement that's high in calcium to any type of homemade plant milk that people might enjoy, because you can throw a little bit of almond or other types of nuts in your high-powered blender like a Vitamix and make a homemade plant milk super easy. I've never tried to make homemade soy milk, but that's another option too. But either way, I like soy milk because it's super creamy. Another great thing about soy milk is it's so rich in protein that it's actually one of the only what they consider like an equivalent to dairy, because dairy milk is really high in protein, and protein is another important nutrient that we need to make sure to get enough of on a daily basis. So soy milk can be a great way to make sure, in addition to calcium, to make sure that we're getting plenty of protein each day. And so I like soy milk for that reason. It's rich in protein. It's rich in all these healthy fats. You know, soy has a lot of mono and polyunsaturated fats, which are the healthy fats. And if you're adding the calcium, then you're also going to get the calcium too. And soy milk's just got a creamy, delicious flavor that I think is great. And soybeans grow in abundance. They're not super hard on the environment like our almonds and a few of the other things. You know, I love almonds, but almond trees require a ton of water. So soy milk can be produced in a way that's more environmentally friendly on a massive scale than can some of the nut-based milks.
All right. Well, that is awesome. The information that you give. My favorite milk, I do stay with soy, and I do like Ripple, the pea protein milk. I also enjoy that.
Yes, Ripple and soy are the only two that would be broadly considered like good equivalents for dairy, right? Most of the other nut-based milks are not, because they just don't have the protein and the same kind of nutrient profile that you would find in dairy. And so, yeah, Ripple and soy are like the two that I can most highly recommend if you're looking for something to kind of replace the nutrients that you would be getting in dairy.
Thank you again, Gabriel, for sharing your knowledge with us today. And until next time, bye-bye.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Remember to check out our website, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.